I would like to welcome everybody here to the Chibi Clash Scrypted AMA. We had some very exciting news last week regarding the acquisition of the Chibi Clash Kingdoms and Survivor by Scrypted, and we are here to talk about that. First, I would like to thank all of our panelists up here for joining. We're going to do introductions first, and then I will introduce how our space is going to run, and then we will kick off the conversation. So first, thank you so much, Ted and Carman, for joining. I know that you have both been, huge staples in the community, the creators of Chibi Clash. So this is something that is a real honor to have you here talking about the community and, what this news means for everybody. If you'd like to, Ted and then Carmen, introduce yourselves briefly so the community can get some insight as to who you are, that would be amazing. I know that the people here know, but for people listening later, perhaps they will not know.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Ridmoose. As you guys know, I'm Wago, aka Ted, the original founder of the Chibi Clash projects. I think most of the people here in the audience are people that have been part of the community since a very long time, and there's some new members that are from AVB or discovering the project for the first time. So, I'll try to speak more towards people who are already familiar with the project for this AMA, because I think this is really talking about the acquisition in itself, what that means to Chibi Clash as a community from my perspective, and personally some of the things that I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of you guys have a lot of questions. And of course, there's a lot of people, if you're familiar with the Chibi Clash community, we're a very international community with people in Asia time zones and European time zones. And personally, since the news, a lot of people have reached out to me, and I've reached out to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people are quite excited to see what exactly this means for the future of Chibi Clash under the Wings guidance and the integration with the AVB scripted platform. So, excited to talk more about that, and also to hear what Tim, Ando, and the team has to say as well.
Thank you so much, Ted. And of course, we would not be the community that we are without the amazing Carmen, who has helped get all of the transition stuff sent over in terms of socials and connections, and making sure that the Chibi Clash community will continue to thrive and grow throughout the transition and after.
Hi everyone, I'm Chi, aka Carmen. I've been with Wago for Chibi Clash since like day 0, or even before that. Before we were doing Chibi Clash, we were working on a lot of projects and apps and all that development stuff. But yeah, since launching Chibi Clash, I've been here, help create this Discord, help build up the community, been involved in all the pivots of product design with Clash Hero, Survivor, Kingdoms, and yeah, happy to see where Chibi Clash will be going from now on with Scrypted. Very excited for what they're doing. I have already seen some sneak peeks of what to come, and I'm super excited for the community and the players.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carmen and Ted. And I would also like to introduce to the Chibi community people who you may not be as familiar with. So we have Tim, who I know has been in here before, but also we have Andy and Dave. So I would like the three of you to introduce yourselves, perhaps in that order. Give a little bit of insight as to who you are and how the Chibi community is going to be super excited about what we're doing.
Well, I'm going to begin. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Cotton. I'm really excited to be here. It's been a long road together with Chibi Clash, and I've known Ted for quite some time, and I think Wago and Carmen have done an amazing job with this community. So quick background on me. I'm the CEO and technical co-founder of Scrypted. Scrypted is a startup dedicated to generative AI and AI agents. We have several emerging technologies around, well, as you've seen in gaming, especially with Chibi Clash, things like massive art generation for the world map, our upcoming video platform, and as well as the AI agent platform that we have. And we're kind of very excited, and we'll talk more about it in a little bit, about where we think these technologies are going to go. But just know that my background comes from decades in game development and AI development as well. And we just have a rock star team on our side. I'm very proud of them. I'm looking forward to Andy and Dave doing their intros.
Hey everyone, I am Ando. I've been in gaming for over 20 years and was scripted for over 2 years, and I was previously working on Chibi Kingdoms before that launched. Definitely really excited about the news here and a lot of ideas we've been discussing in the past, let's say a few weeks, but it's been more like months, things that we want to do. Hopefully we can talk about more of those ideas later on in the AMA. Yeah, just really excited to get going. We've been kind of planning this for quite a while, and so today's finally the day where we get to meet all of you. So looking forward to talking with more of you. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name's Dave, and I've been creating, actually, this year marks the 30th year of my making game art. And I've spent quite a few of those working with both Tim and Ando, and recently with Ted and his team. And so I'm really looking forward to creating a lot of beautiful stuff and hopefully a lot more of it for Chibi in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim and Andy and Dave, for your introductions. Also, I'm sure everyone here knows I am Rude Moose. I joined the Chibi community actually in January and helped take over as community manager, but I actually came from Scrypted. So I started with them back in December. So I've been kind of dual agent mode, which is really exciting because now it doesn't have to be a secret and we can all just hang out and do awesome things together. And with that, I think that concludes all of our introductions, which will bring us to the ground rules for the AMA. So, as we continue on the conversation, please know that we have had quite a few questions submitted in advance. We're going to go over those first and, set the narrative for what we are looking at in terms of the acquisition and the path forward. And we're going to share some key points that we believe the community should hear from us throughout those questions as well. We will also be taking additional questions if you want to submit those here in the bar text chat. I will keep an eye on the chat as we're going, and if those are questions that we can weave into the conversation, we will absolutely do so. If there are questions that perhaps I know that the team will not be prepared to answer thoroughly today, we will also hold those, and I will make sure that we get answers for those moving forward. So please know that we do want to take all of your questions. There will just be some that, perhaps we will need a little bit more time to answer. So I will do my best to collect them all, though. And with that, let us move on to the conversation. So I think the best place to start is at the beginning. And for those who have not yet heard the story, why does this changing of the guard make sense for Chibi Clash? And I think perhaps Ted and Carman could perhaps tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll get started. And, this has been in the works for quite a while. And I think Moose alluded to that, the fact that she worked as a little bit of a double agent since January. And so going back into a bit of history, so we've worked with Scrypted, as the community knows, on the initial development of Kingdoms. And I think I captured this quite well in my recent Twitter posts. It was something that the Scrypted team originally did that really caught my attention. A very early generative agentic AI gaming tool, which I thought was really, really cool. And being a gaming industry veteran, I actually knew Ando from way back in the days when we were both working in mobile gaming. And so, I reached out, got to know Tim, and I think even at that point, we knew that, okay, we really were aligned in terms of wanting to explore new technologies in Web3 gaming. The only difference is that they were doing something completely new, and we had a project that was already running for a good year and a half, 2 years at that point. And we wanted to continue to innovate. But for those of you that have been with us for a long, long time, I think you guys understand that we've been through waves and waves of ups and downs in the Web3 gaming ecosystem as a whole. And so it was a lot of growing pains, but we kept wanting to push the boundaries, and we kept wanting to innovate and really wanted to make the Kingdoms experience very unique. And I think there was a lot of learnings in itself. The design was unique, and we tried to execute that in the best way that we could leading up to the launch of our Chibi Clash token. And during that time, I think we caught a lot of people's attention with what we were doing. But at that time as well, AI was so new. I think a lot of people didn't really quite understand what AI exactly means for gaming and Web3 gaming. But behind the scenes, I saw and knew what Scrypted was doing, and I was thoroughly impressed with a lot of the cool tech on the Agentic AI side that really I thought was going to be groundbreaking. And so we had discussions about, okay, what might be some other cool ways that we might be able to use this for Chibi Clash. But I think at that point, one of the things that had really crossed my mind was, you know what, these guys really have a vision and they had the tools. And from what I understood, they were looking for a playground to experiment with all these really, really cool tools. And one thing led to another in the conversations that we had. And I think it just made total sense that, Chibi Clash became a project within the Scrypted umbrella. And so, that's a bit of context and background from my perspective anyways, of what led to, this really, really exciting day. And in terms of, I'm sorry, Candi, what did you want me to address again with the question?
So I think that you addressed that very well, actually, in terms of why this makes sense, which is a really good lead in to what can the community expect to see as far as this transition process, and the team changes. I know that you've been very active and involved in the Chibi Clash community, and people want to know what's going to happen.
Right. Well, I'll definitely let Scripted team address that a little bit more. I think these were conversations that we've had internally for quite a bit because it was actually really important to me as the founder and the creator of this project that, we're not just handing this over and, this become something completely different, right? So I think it was really important for me to let everyone know that, I would have only wanted this to happen if the team that wanted to take over the project had a vision that was aligned very much closely to ours, which is really pushing the boundaries of what can be done with Web3 gaming and wanting to experiment with cool things with this ecosystem. And I think the biggest thing from a very high level that I personally look forward to is a lot of cool new tech being built on top of what we already have with Kingdoms and with Survivor. I would say, even as a founder of the project, my vision for the project was, on a very high level, wanting to push boundaries. But at the same time, the tech over the past few years have changed so much, right? And for those of you guys that have been part of the Chibi Clash universe since the beginning, you guys probably remember all the kind of interesting things that we tried to do with smart contracts, which at that time was very revolutionary, right? But now when you look back, it's like, oh, okay, well, now anyone can do that. And perhaps there are companies that allows us to, let's say mint contracts with a snap of our fingers, whereas previously it took a lot of effort just to write a custom smart contract that allows us to use, metadata that's interchangeable and whatnot, right? And so anyways, without rambling on too much, personally, I'm just really excited about the future of AI and what that means for pushing the boundaries of what can be done with gaming. And that's where Scripted comes in.
And we are very excited about that, but you'll also be remaining advisors on the project, right? So you're not going away, you'll still be here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they can't drag me away. So I'm just wanting to be here to guide, not even to guide, but then just to assist and help however I can, right? So, like I said, I just really want to have a front row seat to see what's happening with the project. And I think most importantly, during this transition, I think a lot has been built over the course of the past 3.5, 4 years. And I want to make sure that we're not just dumping everything to them on the back end, a lot of smart contracts, code bases, and things like that, that we want to make sure that they fully understand what they're taking over and what they're going to be playing with. So yes, I will be here along with the team to advise and guide however would be most helpful to the Scripted team.
Amazing. Thank you. And I know, Tim, you were going to jump in as well, but maybe that was partly to answer why Scripted is so excited about acquiring Chibi Clash.
You're right, Candi. That's exactly what I was going to do. Everyone, I think, know me. You'll find that I'm generally a hype, excitable person. I usually do things because they make sense. While you and Ted were talking, by the way, I think one of my AI agents edited about 2,083 lines of code related to one of our projects that we'll be integrating with Chibi Clash. So we live in a new world, right? And what's truly amazing about our relationship with Chibi Clash is that Chibi Clash was part of our earliest adventure, our earliest foray into generative AI. Specifically, just even working on Chibi Clash Kingdoms, with what started with the auto RPG demo internally and then turned into an actual commercial product that we were working with different companies like Kuma and Chibi Clash on. And so to come to today, where the technology has advanced very rapidly, where we can make massive edits, where we can add value very quickly, I'm very excited about it because it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Not only are we, acquiring the Chibi Clash games, but as Ted alluded to, there are years of work on smart contracts, on the game engines themselves, on the account systems, the player base management, like all of these things that you would spend, quite a bit of a startup's money on. And when we made the case to our funders and our investors and said we have a unique opportunity to bootstrap our agent framework using Chibi Clash and its underlying pinnings, they were quite enthusiastic and supportive. And that's very rare amongst venture capitalists who are you spending all your money perfectly wisely? And, no one's ever perfect, but we think this is an alignment that I don't think anyone else has ever tried, not in this manner. There's plenty of acquisitions, but very rarely do you find a community that is already existing with each other and where there's an inheritance of will, where, as Ted says, he's going to join our advisory for this project. He's going to continue to be involved, but equally, he trusts us, and we trust him to continue the mission of Chibi to make a truly great game, and then an ecosystem around those games. So, again, we're very excited. We'll speak more about the technology, AI agents, all that sort of stuff a little bit more downstream. But for now, just know that we're extremely passionate about what we're doing with Chibi. It makes sense for our community and the autonomous virtual beings, and it makes perfect sense from moving our abilities forward. And I'll speak more on that soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that exciting answer. And that brings us to one of the questions that the community actually asked, because we've mentioned Chibi Survivor and we've mentioned Kingdoms, but there were questions about the Chibi Auto Battler. And so I think maybe Ted and Tim can help us answer that.
I'll launch first, then I'll let Ted take over. So you guys understand, as part of the acquisition, we don't have the capacity to also handle the mobile app, which is where I think Hero really has evolved. So that is outside of our particular sphere. I'll let Ted speak more on it.
Yeah, and just quickly addressing that. So those of you that have been part of the community for a long, long time, it was a long development journey, and we had some play tests for which was originally the web auto battler and then became the mobile auto battler, and that evolved into the backpack-esque battler called Clash Hero. And to be frank, the development had not been smooth. There were a lot of hiccups with trying to get the gameplay right, trying to get the economy and ecosystem right. We really want to introduce interoperability with items and whatnot. And just to keep in mind, this was all before AI. And I think once generative AI became prevalent, it just really allowed us to better understand, maybe what we should be focusing our resources on shouldn't be traditional gaming, which as a sector has faced a lot of different challenges, right? I think a lot of gaming projects, not just ourselves, when you look at Web3 gaming as a whole, they thought that, we had this opportunity to crack into the Web2 market. And I think it's worthwhile to tell a bit of a story too, now that, I can talk about this in hindsight. We had some really, really major partnerships lined up, I would say about 2.5 years ago with major Web2 companies. And ultimately that fell apart, not because of us, but because they themselves gave up on Web3 or the whole Web 2.5 initiative. So, their products shut down, their teams shut down. People we worked with went on to leave the company, work for other teams. And so we had a setback, but unfortunately that wasn't really due to us. And so that when we started to focus on generative AI and working with Scrypted, that was kind of the beginning of us shifting our priorities as well internally, regardless of this acquisition or not. And so, like I said, we were really much aligned with where Scrypted sees the future of the project. The mobile game basically is kind of on hiatus. Hopefully, there might be an opportunity to revive the tech and we can do something with it. But as Tim mentioned, it's currently not in the future of the current version of Chibi Clash's roadmap.
Awesome. Thank you both for giving additional insight there. I know our community is really excited to learn where we're going and understand a little bit of the roadmap. So that's helpful to have the history, because you can't understand where you're going without knowing where you're coming from. And that being said, I would like to direct the next question from the community to the scripted team, specifically Tim and Andy, to see what your vision of AI is within Kingdoms and Survivor. So how is AI foreseen to enhance the gameplay of both of these games?
Well, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let Andy start this part of the conversation by mentioning that he comes from a long background in mobile development, game development, and was the business director of Square Enix, the largest publisher of Japanese video games. So he knows his stuff, and he's run into a lot of problems in creating and maintaining games. And I think his perspective on this is going to be really valuable. Andy, take it away, and then I'll join in with some of the agent tech.
Sure. And let me add a little bit to that. So I was doing business development for a number of years, but I also have worked a lot within production, product management, worked on a number of MMO games, mobile games as well. And a lot of those games had live ops as an important component in terms of how they were being operated. So we're kind of, from my perspective, it's very difficult to run a live game. Things always have to be executed very perfectly, or you have issues. This is where I really, was excited to join Scripted, and I'm also excited to see where we go with Chibi Clash, because I think AI can bring a lot to the table in terms of how you run a live game, both for doing things like running events, as well as content creation. We've had a number of conversations leading up to this moment about how we could potentially utilize autonomous agents and just AI in general. Tim mentioned a moment ago that he's actively using AI to write code, for example, but it can do a lot more than just that. We have a lot of thoughts there on essentially how we can really kick things off and use a lot of what we've learned over the past several years to enhance things that we're doing with GB. But Tim.
Oh man, okay, well, this is the fun part for me. So let's talk about a realistic plan, right? Like, we are a small startup. We have a couple of core founders, we have some employees, we have some great resources, externships, other people who help contribute. But it's not like we're a 30-person developer team. What we do have, though, is a completely new set of generative tools that, frankly, we think are better than almost everybody's in their particular fields, or have different use cases that people have just not been expecting. We want to unleash them on Chibi Clash. The first one is something that I think anyone who's doing an acquisition would care about, and that is answering the question, how much of what we would consider boring engineering and developer work can be absorbed into automation? And so that's stuff like, where are the servers hosted? How do they communicate? What are the watchdogs on them? How do we streamline these so that we can deliver lower costs for ourselves, which we can reward the players with, obviously, right? Those are all the normal corporate things you care about. Just kind of making the game make some financial sense, right? But then Andy alludes to like the cool part, which is the content treadmill, which is the whole thing where in the previous cycle, we saw tons of Web3 companies raise lots of money, and unlike Chibi Clash, not even deliver a game because they just didn't have the experience, the time, or just the runway to do so. So now, here we are saying, not only are we going to be able to automate the boring stuff with AI, but because of the way our agent system works, we can create roles and jobs for individual AI agents that kind of work together and create content. And not just, comes out of a ChatGPT style content. I mean, like, with the lens of 20 years of game development experience as a framework, as a reference for them. themed in the proper Chibi style, allowing us to upgrade things. We're very excited about that. So I've talked about A and B at this point, right? A is automation, B is like kind of content treadmill creation. The third part that I think is the unlock is proving, even if it's on Web 2 rails at first, that we can create enough valuable content interactions between players, the world, and AI agents that it spawns economic loops, a virtual economy, something that can thrive. And the reason I know this works is because Andy and I and Dave, we've all worked on massively multiplayer online role-playing games. We know how that formula works, right? We know how to apply that with AI agents, and Chibi is the grand playground. So rather than us just being like a shotgun and trying lots of different ideas and hoping something sticks, we have a very roadmap style plan on how to achieve a future where playing Chibi is not just fun, but rewarding. And rewarding in the sense of both your time and the money that you put into it. So that's what's exciting to me. Obviously, there are other benefits that we've kind of talked about before about us being able to also use the Chibi technology to make better AI agents. The one thing I can say about that is that Scrypted, unlike literally every other AI agent framework on the planet at the moment, does not treat our agents as simply a text or image loop running on a large language model. It is a combination of virtual world technology where they simulate their own space and time. And obviously, being able to put something like that in the Chibi games gives us more fidelity for training them, for creating more complex agents that are capable of doing more interesting things in the real world as well. And doesn't require us to spend a couple $100 million on robotic technology. All right.
All right. So that's interesting because not only did you answer the question I asked him, but you, I think, also very largely answered the next question, which our community had asked if you could explain the vision of Scripted's AI framework and its strength versus competitors. And here you are explaining why we are a better fit.
Yep,
Which
I'm
is
good for this
exciting.
stuff.
You are very good at this stuff. So that also, the community, and I know that the AVB community has heard a lot about this and had questions that they wanted for the Chibi community to understand. But essentially, what are AVBs and why this matters? And this is something that we have seen a lot of discussion on socials of the first AVB being Hollywood, and she's doing video generation. But now you've mentioned that you're going to bring in AVBs to also do world building and content generation and potentially in-game interactions. So these are things that, from the Scripted umbrella, they do a lot. But the community is curious to know what else they might be able to do or what can we expect here?
Okay. Well, first off, I'm really glad that we're asking about the AVB side. Just for background for the people in the Chibi Clash ecosystem, this is a strange story, and it's a lovely story because it's something that's actually very unique in the meme coin landscape. There is a meme coin named Autonomous Virtual Beings, AVB. It was based on my blog article of the same name that I wrote in early 2024 before the actual meme coin cycle had kicked off. Someone had found it, turned it into a meme coin, and while we were working on our core technology, by the way, and they put it out on Twitter, and then they rug pulled it. And then the community realized that this is a real project, that Scrypted is a real company, that I'm a real person. And they asked if they could community take over the coin, prove that it was really well distributed, and if we would adopt them or not. And I said, yes, we will. Thank you, new community. And so AVB is more of a community token for Scripted and not something that we ourselves have an allocation or an investment in, which means that many things that we do, we tend to brand under the name AVB for a framework, which we are building an AI agent framework for public use. It's currently in private use. And those AVBs are a different kind of agent. I talked about it just a minute ago, but they are based more similarly to something that you would see from Loaf's Daydreams project or Yohei Nakajima's Pippin structure. The difference for us is that ours rely on different kinds of models that are capable of changing themselves. They have not reached sentience. They are not actually intelligent or anything like that. But think of them as ants, little digital life forms. And the more we expose them to game challenges, I think the more advanced they'll become. So what I'm very excited about, of course, is that all of the ownership that Chibi Clash players have into the properties, we want to augment with our AVB stack, such that, for instance, things like NFTs come to life. Things like non-player characters in the game come to life and start living in their kingdoms and doing things. And eventually, one of my goals actually is talking with a lot of the other AI agent projects and just saying, come claim a plot. Come have your agent play in the game and we'll provide a plugin for that. And the reason we'd want to do that is because then we import their believers too. You can imagine that if we find 3 or 4 similar AI agent companies in the space, and they bring in their agents to own some kingdoms and play around in the games, suddenly we're bringing in their thousands of believers. And I think being able to bootstrap more interactions is one of the most valuable things that our technology stack can bring to the table. Not just, oh, look, it's technologically superior. Superiority doesn't help as much as traction. And what we want to bring to Chibi Clash is a lot of traction.
Awesome. And that is interesting that you've mentioned about bringing agents in to come take a look at plots, because the next question we had on our agenda is actually the community asking, what advantages will a piece of land or land ownership give? Because we know that's something that exists right now in Chibi Kingdoms. They're all little plots of land, that people have and are looking for, what is the future for my land? So the community wants to know if the team has crafted any plans for what will be coming for this. And we wanted to direct that to Andy and Dave, but Tim has also given some information about what we might be seeing for future demand.
I'll kick us off on this one. So my intro, we were pretty heavily involved with the creation of Chibi Clash Kingdoms. A lot of the underlying tech that ended up becoming the Kingdoms map came from stuff that we were working on, scripted, kind of behind the scenes. But that was one of our kind of driving interests in sort of revisiting Chibi Clash, because we had a lot of, I think, really exciting ideas during development, things that maybe weren't all in scope at the time, but were discussed that, wow, if we ever get a chance, we'd love to come back and revisit this, because there's so much more we could do here. There's so many possibilities. It took a lot of time, obviously, just to get the initial tech in place and get things up and running. But now's our chance to revisit a lot of those ideas and do some kind of amazing things. And so Dave is obviously here with us. We can shed some light on his perspective from kind of the creative or art side of things. That's more of his background. Dave, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I don't want to get carried away, but AI it's in a really super exciting place right now because it's growing so fast, and the things that it brings to the table change almost monthly. And so we're just really trying to focus and find a really good place, sort of a good tool set for us to build good things to bring to the table, and really just leverage this to bring it into a game and really show off how a small team can create large amounts of stuff and just really exciting designs and things and become more agile. And not to get too carried away with what we're talking about here, but it's really, really exciting point in history that we're at with this. And so we're really just having to make those decisions and design things, build stuff out, and then really want to use this as the platform to be able to really showcase that and make some really wonderful stuff for everybody. So yeah, it's just super exciting. So
Amazing. Thank you both for that. And we had a very long question, I think, that I'd like to share next, which is really not as much a question, more as rhetorical sort of feedback is how I'd prefer to present it. Because the community wants to share some of their thoughts about lands and how they currently work. Specifically, with the land tier system right now is how the ecosystem is currently based on. But they'd like to consider potentially removing the way that land pricing mechanics work, as opposed to letting landowners create their own land prices. And I will note that from the community perspective, this is good feedback. From a team perspective, we will need to look into this. I can't give any updates on that now specifically because I know lands are also tied to contracts and there may be many technical things there. So I'm sharing your question as feedback to the team where we are making note of it. But we also know that the way that land upgrades work is based on Clash token, and Clash prices have changed, which means perhaps the cost for upgrading may need to be revisited. And that's something that the team is going to look into. We'll get into tokenomics a little bit later. We have a question before that, but I just wanted people to know that we have heard, and Tim has unmuted, so he has thoughts.
Well, Candi, you know I always have thoughts. And I think this is a well-prepared community question, honestly. The number one thing I would say is that, yes, you are absolutely right. And I love the way you prefaced it, that yes, some things are bound in the contract for pricing and we would need to look at it. Equally, I think Vitalik himself has well pointed out over the years that all things are equal in the hands of the community. And it's where the community decides what is real that makes what is real. As far as the concern about the pricing, the changes to the underlying Clash token valuation, all of those things, I think that is very well understood and well taken. And I think as we move forward, the initial system for land pricing made so much sense for the pre-sale and the early days of the project and what it was doing. I'm not convinced that it necessarily should remain that way. And I think we are open to, modifying how land pricing works, giving more power to the players, and letting the free market do a little bit more decision making. Now, that being said, I don't want to overpromise at this time. That will be an evolving conversation. I'll need some more time with the team before we make any hard commitments. But just know that we're aware.
Yeah, I'll chime in here as well as the person that created the whole system. With things of acquisition, obviously, is both consideration with the economic side, but also with the tech side. And, when we were discussing the details of the transition, Chibi Clash as a project is very unique because of our history, right? It's not just, here, take over the code base for Survivor, and that's that. The smart contracts were quite customized and very unique because at the time we really wanted to create a unique experience for the land purchasing, for the future of the economy. And one of the things I have mentioned to the Scrypted team is that I told our community that people that own land are essentially our stakeholders in this project, right? And I want to emphasize and make sure that Kingdoms has the DNA of Scrypted. This is something that we really built together and will always kind of be core to the project moving forward. And I think we're all aligned with that. And the biggest thing that is really taking the time to make sure that we're not rushing into, look, this is what people are asking for. Let's just completely scrap out what we've previously done and do that, right? I think there is still this long-term plan for what we want to see with Kingdoms. So now it's really phase one, replanning the economics, and also for Scrypted team to understand what we have done, and then to be able to figure out, okay, this is how we can integrate our experiences to make things make sense, in the long run. So that's kind of my take from our discussions.
Thank you, Ted and Tim, for giving very insightful answers to the very long question that our community had asked, which I think is really important to be having these conversations, and it's something that we will continue to encourage far beyond just this event. And that gets us to the next question that the community submitted, actually, which is specific to tournaments. And so I know that we've been doing tournaments, actually, and what the community does not know is that for example, the Venomous Dunes and the Eternal Spring events, those are things that the Scripted team has been collaborating on behind the scenes, kind of getting our feet wet. But I would like to turn that over to Andy to see, as we move forward, what else we might be looking at in terms of, will there be more tournaments? How are we looking at those?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we're kind of doing almost like a pre-transition period of being involved, giving input, and working closely for Chibi Clash team, kind of leading up to this point. So we're familiar now with some of the events that have been running recently, as well as we've been taking a look at some of the feedback from the community in terms of those events. Definitely have some ideas there. We want to for sure run more events. It's going to take us a little bit of time to kind of do a little bit more on the transition side now that we're sort of officially announcing that Scripted is kind of heading things up now. But give us a little time there, and then definitely want to experiment here. I think there's a lot of things we can do outside of what's been done before. I think we can share more details on events and other kinds of content ideas sometime in the near future. Just be aware that we are actively discussing it.
Thank you. And then the last umbrella of planned questions. I know we only have about 9 minutes left, so I want to be conscious of time. But I'm going to direct these to Tim because the community is curious just overall about tokenomics. What are our plans for the Clash token? Are we looking at changes to the tokenomics and distribution? What about AVB as a token? Will that also be integrated? I'm going to ask you that wide umbrella question and see where you go with it, Tim.
Oh my, it is a super fun umbrella question full of regulatory pitfalls and legal requirements, like making me preface with, this is not investment advice, do your own research, and other such things. By the way, I take all that seriously. So as I said earlier in this discussion, AVB is a community token. So we have an incentive for our users, our community members of AVB, to play nicely and interact well with Chibi Clash and vice versa, right? So I think there's a couple of things I want to say out first, just off the cuff. One, as far as tokenomics for the Clash token itself, I have had many long discussions with Ted about this, just understanding the current structure, understanding what, like, the difference between the foundation, Chibi's stake, the current treasury, all of that sort of thing. And luckily, I am in no particular stranger to this kind of setup. In fact, we just recently collaborated with the Hollywood agent on Virtuals, which was the most oversubscribed agent launch on the new Virtuals Genesis platform. If you've been paying attention to Virtuals Genesis, that's what you want to know right there. 2,100% oversubscribed. So for the actual tokenomics coming up, I just want to be super clear. We're not making any deep changes to Clash. We hope to add value through gameplay. We also hope to allow people who are using AVB to interact with the Chibi Clash system, and there will be some sort of discount premium there. That's all I can really say at this time.
Thank you. And I guess the only other question that the community had was about exchanges. And I know that's a very tricky question because it's full of legal stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll speak to it directly, right? Please understand that the Clash token is actually a foundation managed token that is, and I shouldn't even say managed, but it is not something that we directly control. So as far as listings and other things with sexes or dexes, it's not directly in our control. That being said, Scripted has a great relationship with most of the exchanges. We're very friendly through our network with people who care about these things. And of course, I think there should be strong interest. And I hope there's strong interest in the future of what Chibi and Clash are doing. Again, though, that's all I can say right now.
Thank you. And that actually covers all the questions the community submitted in advance. So I'm very excited about that. And for anybody who asked questions and is not here, we'll have the recording and it'll be good. But with the last 5 minutes or so, I wanted to open the floor to our panel up here and see if there's anything that we haven't yet covered that you were like dying to share with the community.
Well, not necessarily dying to share with the community, but I just really want to take the last moments of this AMA to thank the people that have been so supportive of Chibi over the years. A lot of names I'm familiar with are in the audience and probably will be listening. So, Keep Case, Ricky, Duststorm, Deidra, you guys have been, absolutely the kind of pillars of this community, along with others like Hiker, Shred. So, for me personally, this has been such a journey, and honestly, we wouldn't be in this position and wouldn't have kept going for so long if it wasn't for the guys that really believed in what we were building with Chibi Clash. And it really speaks to a lot to our project that we've survived so long, despite being a much more humble project than some of the other ones that, as Tim mentioned, might have raised a lot more capital and just blew it all, didn't even ship a game, and disappointed a lot of people, right? And I think we wouldn't have agreed to this acquisition if we didn't really think that there was a future for Chibi that is more exciting than where I've thought things would be going. And so, yeah, we'll see where things go. The exciting thing being in the space that we're in is that it's almost impossible to even predict where things are going to be 6 to 12 months down the line. But what's important is to have a vision of what we're building towards and where we think things are going and where we want to be when things are hopefully heading towards that direction. There's been a lot of uncertainty, but at the same time, I think there's no doubt that the future of AI looks promising. It's going to fundamentally change everything around us. And as I've said many times before, I'm really excited about what Tim, Ando, Dave, and the Scrypted team are working on and building. And I'm really excited to see this evolution of Chibi Clash under the wings. So I'm very thankful for all the partners, all the friends that I've met along the way. And yeah, I'm really excited for the future.
Well, Ted, on behalf of the Scrypted team, I just want to say it has been an absolute pleasure working with you. It has been absolutely amazing building with you. And I know that you have an undying love for this project, and we are so excited that you'll continue on as an advisor to help Chibi reach new heights.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you all for joining, and for everybody in the future who will be listening. Especially thank you to everybody up here on stage for helping answer the community's questions. This is both really big news and really exciting news, and of course people had questions, so we are always happy to help answer those. Even if you come up with them later on, be sure to reach out to us and we will do our best to get you answers just as quickly as we can. And looking forward to continuing to build out this great Chibi Clash adventure with you all. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your Monday, and we will see you in the server.
Thanks, everyone.